media. As consumers, we are bombarded by it at every turn, like the Incredible Hulk being bombarded by gamma rays. But what makes some media endure, while others are banished to the forgotten black hole of obscurity, never to be heard from again? Who or what decides this? Hetero life mates Steve and Yahel want to know, and they want to know now. This is Obscurity Now. And what's up, Obscurians? Welcome to another episode of Obscurity Now, the show where we take a look at weird and almost forgotten pieces of media, and then we decide if they should be tossed into the black hole of obscurity, never to be heard from again, or remembered for all of human history. My name is Steve, and with me is a man whose phaser is at level 10. It's...
It is Yahel. That is not an actual setting.
What are the settings?
You
what are the
idiot.
settings?
Basically, it's like stun and kill.
I just remember there was...
Although
What's
you can...
that?
Well, basically, there's like varying degrees of stun, and then like there's something in between, but I don't really have a name for it. And then there's kill.
Well, for like the rednecks who've never been on a starship, that's how they refer to it. They go, my phaser's at level 10, I guess.
Yeah, you can also set it to overload and explode like a grenade.
Wow.
But it's only
I mean, is it one of those things where it just does whatever the writers want it to do almost?
There's a couple times. I mean, they're pretty good about the rules for the most part, but there are a couple things that I was going to get into here where, what a phaser does and how it kills you can change depending on the plot.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't have the pleasure of watching us, I'm here actually speaking to a member of Starfleet, or at least a man wearing a Starfleet uniform. What should I refer to you as? What is it, like Arch Captain? Archduke?
You know what, Steve? Since you're not in the service, you can just call me Yahel. It'll be fine.
Oh man, I'm glad we got that out of the way. I was really nervous there for a second.
Yeah, I could tell, Steve. At ease, soldier.
Well, at the time of recording this, it is Halloween time, or October to be more specific. And last year, we, sort of deviated a little bit from format, and we took a look at a Star Trek episode to see if it could actually be scary or be, enjoyed by the many Trek fans during Halloween as sort of like a Halloween episode.
Right.
And we are revisiting that format with this episode. Do you remember what was the last one called that we looked at?
I think it was called Genesis. I can actually tell you right now.
That sounds right. Because I remember many Sega Genesis jokes during that episode.
Hold on. Hey, you know what would help if my keyboard, if I would have had the bar highlighted. I want to say it's like Genesis 15 episode where it's like the one where the crew devolves. De-evolves.
Really just act really weird.
Well, we did. Yeah, it's called Genesis. It's one where we get the awesome spider Barkley.
Oh
creature.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And then we get a couple decent creatures, and then we get a really crappy Worf Klingon creature.
I remember that. So that one was indeed called Genesis. And this one is called Night Terrors, chosen by the High Commander here himself, Yahel. Sorry, just regular Yahel, for this special Halloween edition of. So, do you actually every Halloween do you pull out these episodes and watch them, or is this just something for the podcast?
No, I mean I'm a pretty big horror fan, so like I'm watching horror stuff all year round anyway. But I watch. I can't remember the last time a week went by where I didn't at least watch one or two TNG episodes in my life. At least since they hit streaming and since I got the Blu-rays and stuff. So this one though, I mean I've seen every TNG episode at least 3 to 4 times, some more. This one. Probably seen it like 3 or 4 times. This was probably the 4th time, but it had been a while since I'd watched it.
I hear you.
I wish I would have remembered this one last year, because I do think that this one's a little bit more horror is not the right word, but like more spooky, like more in line with the where they're clearly trying to create like that spooky tension throughout it.
And I think they do a pretty good job of that, like at first, but we'll get into that here in a second. In case for whatever reason you didn't check out last year's Halloween Trek episode, in case you don't know, Yahel's a big-time Star Trek fan, and I would say that I'm a casual fan at best. Just watched, episodes here and there, but my knowledge doesn't compare to his in the slightest. In fact, if I was on the Enterprise, I'd probably be a janitor or something along those lines.
Well, Steve, if you watched enough Star Trek, you would know that there's a scene where Riker explains that the ship cleans itself. You fucking idiot!
All right.
You're not even good enough to be a janitor. So listen, if you're going to be a civilian, you could work in 10 Forward as a bartender. Why they have bartenders, even though there's like replicators everybody can just walk to and get whatever they want? I don't know.
Wait, are you saying in 2022 that Guinan is useless? Is that what you're saying?
Well, she's not useless, because people that go to 10 Forward obviously want that experience of like being in a bar and being around other people, and like that's the gist of it. And they do actually have an episode where one of the bartenders explains why he's a bartender on the Enterprise. And basically he's like, because I want to explore the galaxy, but I don't want to do Starfleet science stuff.
that was a two-parter, right?
No.
It's just two-hour-long episodes of that guy talking about why he wants to be a janitor. Hey, they were really thorough back then. Yeah, that's what you got to appreciate when it comes to Gene Roddenberry. And
he's a supporting character in an episode about basically the whole episode is about, it's called Lower Decks. It's about characters that are not part of the main cast, but what the underlings of the Enterprise are up to on a day-to-day basis.
Right. I've heard of that one. So
don't patronize me.
I have. I really have. I'm sure it's fantastic. Terrific.
I see you've set your phaser to patronize.
Hey, according to some guy, they don't have levels, but
they do, but they don't have like 1 through 10
I got you.
or something. At least not that I remember.
All right, you've already outed me as being a fraud.
Maybe they do. Maybe they do.
My court-martial?
Maybe they do.
Uh-oh. He's researching.
They do have court magic. Oh, okay. Stun, disruption, and materialize. So see, I told you it was 3. I just couldn't remember that third one.
All right. So you ready to talk about Star Trek Night Terrors?
I am always ready to talk about Star Trek, and let's get into Night Terrors.
Welcome to your feature presentation.
All right, so we're going to mix things up yet again. Yahel's going to take us through the walkthrough. But, of course, we've got all the info you could ever want about Star Trek Night Terrors. Did you want to talk about something real quick while I fix your camera?
Sure, I can go over a little bit of Night Terrors. So a couple of things about this episode that I guess this will be as good of a place of any to mention is that the music and lighting in this episode are very different from most TNG episodes. Usually TNG episodes are pretty brightly lit, at least in terms of the sets on the ship itself, and just like in general, even on most alien ships. On this one, any new sets are very kind of like dimly, darkly lit, and as the Enterprise loses power, we see it become like the rooms become very dimly lit as well. Whereas in a lot of other episodes where the Enterprise is losing power for whatever reason, they don't normally like turn down the lights. So they're clearly trying to set a little bit more of an atmosphere here. And also the music right off the bat, even from the beginning, it's kind of usually like the music in TNG, regardless of whatever the episode's about, it's very just kind of classical music, especially at the beginning. And then as you get into the episode, they kind of alter it to fit more, whatever's going on. And right from the beginning, it's like very eerie, kind of spooky kind of music that, supposed to let you know there's some kind of weird tension in the air.
And I think they did a great job establishing that tension right in the very beginning. Oh my God, what is wrong with you, OBS? And I look forward to talking about it.
Why don't we just wait for you to fix it? And then
yeah, go for it. Oh, well, I guess that's it. I'm just going to have to do some editing. God damn it. Remember when I was like, oh, we're going to live stream, so I never have to edit. That did not work. All right. You're locked. There's no reason for you to move. Okay, so we'll just... All right, so jumping into the my notes here, I see this premiered March 16th, 1991. Why not October 31st? Why didn't this premiere in October?
Well, in the UK, it did premiere in October. But yeah, I mean, this isn't really like a Halloween episode, per se. It's just kind of a weird, spooky episode. And it was filmed, I read, in January. So pretty quick turnaround
Right.
time.
Was there ever... I'm sure the answer is probably no, but... Like, all right, so we talk about, the Halloween-themed episodes that a lot of TV shows did. And, obviously this one and the Genesis one are definitely spooky and lean more towards horror. But, they never have, like, an iconic, like, jack-o'-lantern or, scarecrow or anything like that. Has there ever been a time when anyone went into the holodeck and all that stuff was there?
I mean, there's an original series episode that's kind of more of a Halloween episode. I want to say maybe even Cauldron is in the title, and there's, like, a giant black cat. But, like... I mean, there's probably some episodes that I can't think of right now where there's probably something on the holodeck that's like kind of, harkening back to like horror or something, traditional horror. But there isn't like a whole episode where like the main plot is really like, your traditional, hey, it's Halloween or whatever. But, it's kind of like that for any holiday. There isn't like a Christmas episode of TNG or any other Star Trek. There's no Father's Day episode.
Oh man!
although I do have one that I want us to cover for Father's Day this year, a DS9 episode. But yeah, I mean, it's just like in the future of Star Trek, things are very secular, I guess, and
as they should be.
It didn't just. Yeah, and it didn't just get rid of Christmas. It got rid of, I guess, every other holiday.
It makes sense. I mean, I'm just
saying
it makes sense. They're so far in the future. Traditions have changed. What is it? Country borders have, conjoined or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, they do celebrate birthdays. And there are a lot of alien holidays that get celebrated.
It's all about those aliens these days.
Yeah. But as far as the human, the Federation, which is what Starfleet is a part of, or is like they're not really supposed to be a military, but kind of like, I don't know, they're like a pseudo-military arm of the Federation, and it's thousands of worlds, so you have lots of different cultures. So it doesn't make sense necessarily for there to be like them celebrating like,
right,
Mother's Day or other human holidays. Or whatever.
Sure, I gotcha. So, for those of you who've never heard of this episode, here's the synopsis. The Enterprise gets trapped in a Tychon's rift, an energy-absorbing rupture in space, where all but Data, Troy, and Guinan experience rising hallucinations and paranoia. And this was directed by Les Landau. And he's directed a couple of Star Trek, but of course, since this is Obscurity Now, I chose the more obscure stuff that he's worked on. Are you familiar with the show Superforce?
No, I thought you were going to mention Tales from the Dark Side because he directed a bunch of those episodes. But no, I'm not familiar with Superforce.
Is or was a RoboCop ripoff, like about a cop like in a suit. He wasn't stuck in it though. Basically, I guess it's more like Iron Man because he could just put the suit on whenever he wanted to stop crime and then take it off. But of course, since it's TV, he only puts it on in like the last 10 minutes of the episode. But of course, since it was like robots or whatever, I thought it was awesome. That's one I already added it to the list.
I was just going to ask you if we need to add it to the list. I'm looking at some pictures from it. Yeah, we need to cover this.
So after that, of course, I had to put a SeaQuest 2032. Make sure you check out our SeaQuest episode. And apparently he directed an episode of Mantis, a show we also covered.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
And then he, I guess, ended his career, it seems, according to IMDb, with Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah, he was a very prolific director of pretty much all of the TNG shows, from TNG up through Enterprise.
Yeah, it seems like most of the people involved here, aside from one of the writers, are like Trek regulars, including writer Pamela Douglas. And she worked on the PBS show, which I also want us to cover someday, called Ghost Rider. We talked about, at least off-air, about Ghost Rider. Something called TV 101. Not sure what that is. And then the CBS School Break Special, Different Worlds, the Story of Interracial Love.
Oh, boy.
Which I'm sure is an after-school special, but, if you skew it the right way...
I wonder how that holds up. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe it holds up
maybe
well.
I was the one who watched that as an 8-year-old, and that's why I'm in the... that's why I'm in the situation I'm in now. So, yeah, the person who... Oh, yeah, and after her, we've got Jerry Taylor. She worked on the Incredible Hulk TV show, a TV movie called Please Don't Hit Me, Mom, Magnum P.I., and it seems...
Could that be any more on the nose?
I know.
Don't hit me, Mom. What do you think that movie's about, Steve?
Aliens.
Any idea
Starfleet,
what it might be about?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
A guy in a robot suit.
Named Mom.
Magnum P.I., and apparently she is the creator of the Star Trek DS9 arcade game. You ever play that game?
I have. I think she was like a creative director on it. I don't think she like created it.
Yeah,
per se,
that's
but,
just what they have her listed as on IMDb.
Yeah, she later on became like the showrunner for Star Trek Voyager. And in fact, I want to say she might have been a co-creator of Star Trek Voyager. So she ended up becoming pretty prominent in the world of Star Trek for the time.
I noticed. It looked like she worked for quite a few of the shows for a bit there. And
yeah, she's basically the reason why, from what I understand, that Troy and Doc Counselor Troy gets like a real uniform later on. And gets like becomes a commander and gets like a little bit more serious episodes.
Is it safe to say she's the Kathleen Kennedy of Star Trek?
I mean, I guess you could kind of say that, but I mean, she gave also Crusher like takes command of the Enterprise later on, but also in the last season of TNG, Commander Crusher has sex with a ghost. So you win some, you lose some. I guess
totally crushed it. I thought you'd appreciate that. I was wrong.
Yeah.
All right. So, of course, the show was produced by Paramount Television. Why don't you tell us some of the iconic members of this cast?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, well, if you've seen Star Trek, you know who these people are. I'm going to go through them very quickly. Patrick Stewart, arguably the most famous of the main cast. You know him as Professor X. And a bunch of other things. He's an amazing actor, unreasonably good. I don't know how they got him to do TNG. I know he was a nobody.
Like, a steady paycheck. I'll take it.
Actually, basically, like his manager, his agent at the time, told him, "Look, just take the show. It's not going to last more than one season. You'll be able to make some decent money for at least a little while." And have some put away. He's like, oh, okay. And next thing you know, it ends up becoming a major part of his life.
You're living in America now. The medical system there is terrible. So you better take this job because, you could get hurt and then be in debt for the rest of your life.
Well, he actually moved to America because of this job. And he lived out of his suitcase in a hotel for the first 6 months or something because he was just waiting for it to get canceled.
Now that's funny.
Yeah, he has a lot of good stories. Then we have Jonathan Frakes, who plays Commander William Riker. He's sort of the debonair, handsome ladies' man of the show, although we don't really see that play out in this episode. He ended up becoming more well-known as a director after this. He's directed a ton of stuff. Still active today. Also, I think a lot of people, because of the memes going around, know him as the host of Beyond Belief.
Oh, man, I remember that show back in the day.
I watch it every once in a while. It's on Tubi, and it's fun.
It's fun.
However, I'm pretty sure, regardless of what they tell you, every story is not true. Then we've got LeVar Burton, who, at the time that the show went on the air, he was technically the biggest name because he had been in Roots and a few other things. And then, of course, he did Reading Rainbow. He's another guy that's done some directing, and he plays Geordie LaForge. And we've got Michael Dorn as Worf, Gates McFadden as Crusher. We saw Gates McFadden about a month ago on a show we covered called Marker.
Oh man, the numbers on that one were huge.
Yeah, we've got Marina Sirtis, who plays Counselor Deanna Troi, Brent Spiner, who plays the android Commander Data, Lieutenant Commander Data. I'm not going to go through all of the extras, but I do want to point out that this is one of the episodes with Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan. She is not a regular cast member. She is a reoccurring cast member. She basically wanted to be on Star Trek, and she asked for them to create a role for her. She was a big deal at the time, so they created the role of Guinan, and basically whenever Whoopi could fit it in her schedule, she would show up. Then we've got Colm Meaney as Chief O'Brien. He was like another kind of reoccurring character on TNG. He ends up marrying Rosalind Chow's character of Keiko O'Brien. Rosalind Chow, I can't remember if she had already done the Joy Luck Club, or I think that might have been later, but she was in that. And Colm Meaney, a.k.a. Chief O'Brien, he goes on to be a regular in Deep Space Nine and have many an awesome episode.
Yeah, so yeah, that's my question. Did he start out on TNG or Deep Space Nine?
He starts out on TNG. He's in the very first episode, and he's just like a lowly, I can't remember, I think he's just like a navigator or something at first, and then he becomes like a chief later on. There again, there's no need for janitor. Steve,
is there ever a time
then eventually
when Picard is like, Enterprise, suave your own poop deck, and then it does it?
As punishment? Maybe off air. I don't know. Off camera. But I mean, that's pretty much most of the cast that's of import. There's a few extras, or not extras, but guest stars that do ensign roles that have a few lines here and there, but they didn't really have anything of note in their IMDb. So they're dead.
I would like to throw in that, of course, Worf might be just a little better well-known, or shall I say Michael Dorn might be just a little bit better known as the voice of Weasel from I Am Weasel, IR Baboon cartoons. You remember those?
No.
It was like a cartoon. Remember when Cartoon Network started coming out with their own cartoons, like Dexter and Dexter's Laboratory, and there was another one, Cow and Chicken, and then after Cow and Chicken, they would have IR Baboon versus I Am Weasel, and he was the voice of the Weasel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he does do like some voice work. Like he did the voice of Prometheus on Arrow. And he's done a few other things. Yeah, the awesome voice, and I really like him as an actor too. He was. Did you know he was on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the 2015?
No,
show?
I did not know that. Wait, is that the CGI one?
I don't know, but he did like Captain Mozart.
Okay.
I don't know if that speaks to you.
No, sorry.
And then the other thing that people might know him from more recently as you know, like an on-camera actor, he was a regular or recurring character on Castle for like 6 episodes.
Cool. Yeah, I never really watched that one myself, but good to know. Good to know.
Me either. But yeah, that is pretty much the cast of importance.
The cast of importance. That sounds very important. I don't know if you already mentioned. I just wrote down some fun trivia. Just that Marina recalled the terrified look on Troy's face when she's traveling through that. I guess apparently she's afraid of heights, and I guess she was actually being suspended in like in midair while they were projecting that crazy crap. Or no, it must have been a green screen.
Yeah. So they green screen her in a scene that we'll talk about later, where she's having these like nightmares, and she's like flying through these this weird cloud thing.
And a spoiler alert:
suspended her in.
There's an explosion, and it's reused from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. They reuse the explosion.
Yep. That's a pretty common thing. There's like an explosion from the Undiscovered Country, which is like, I think it's from the Undiscovered Country, which is the original series movie that gets reused in the first movie that the Generations cast did, which is like a Klingon ship that gets destroyed. So yeah, that's like actually a pretty common thing that they've done numerous times to save money, because this is the age of everything's a model.
All right, so why don't you, Captain Yahel, go ahead and take us through Night Terrors?
Alrighty, so we open on with a captain's log from Starfleet's been given orders, or I'm sorry, the Enterprise has been given orders by Starfleet to find a lost ship called the USS Britain. It failed to arrive at its destination and it hasn't been heard from in like 29 days. They come up on the ship. It's adrift in a binary system that's never been explored. So they end up sending an away team to go investigate. And once there, the away team is Worf, Data, Riker, Crusher, and Troy. And they get there and they find that the entire bridge crew is dead. And in a very unusual move for Star Trek TNG, at least, we see pretty graphically some of these deaths. One of them is who I guess is the captain. She's in the captain's seat. She has like either a large knife or a big chunk of metal like through her chest, and it's pretty bloody. Then we see that another person was kind of like killed by a phaser and they were maimed. And this is where I was like saying to you, I think off air, that like what a phaser does to kill you can really vary on the plot, because in most cases when someone's killed by a phaser, they just like disintegrate.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah. But in this case they didn't for whatever reason. So they have like, they're like blue and look a little bit like a zombie kind of. But yeah, they got like scars and cuts all over their face. We see somebody else that has cuts over their face that's sitting down. Anyway, so everybody's dead on this ship except for one person they find alive in the turbo lift, which is like an elevator for the starships. And Deanna, I think, is the one that senses that he's a Betazoid, which is her same race, and Betazoids are telepathic. And he's scared, he's not saying anything, and that's our cold open. And we go to the opening credits, which I'm not going to review here, but Steve, what do you think about this opening scene, and specifically since you are a music man of sorts, a musician, if you will.
Music man?
Sorry, this old-fashioned that Guinan made me is a little strong. What did you think about the opening, and specifically, I'm curious about your thoughts about the music.
Oh, I thought it was off to a great start. Just establishing the mystery, as in what's going on with this ship that they found, and yeah, the music was great. It was very atmospheric, very horror movie-esque. Like I was on board from the get-go.
Good. Yeah, I agree. The music, especially like if you're a regular viewer, it's very different. And even the way kind of Picard is sitting in his seat, he's sitting like awkwardly, Patrick Stewart just does a lot of little things throughout the episode to kind of like, get the tension across.
Yeah. Picard was super nuanced through this. I mean, he's the perfect guy for this show because that's Star Trek The Next Generation, right? Just pure nuance. Sort of.
Well,
to a point.
Sometimes. I mean, he's great because he can make some of the sillier stuff or stuff that could like come across as like really cheesy. He can make it come across believable.
Sure, that's
and legit.
When you get a British guy, they're good at that.
Yeah. Especially in the first couple seasons where the stories are not so good. He does a lot with little.
Right.
But moving on, we start Act 1. Beverly tells Picard that They're in sick bay. Beverly tells Picard that there's dead all over the Britannia, which is the name of the ship. She tells him how like some crew members were found barricaded in their rooms with weapons all around them. Others were found dead in the halls, and there was evidence that they had been involved in hand-to-hand combat, which is highly unusual for Starfleet. Starfleet is basically, for those that haven't ever watched Star Trek, it's kind of a military arm, like I mentioned earlier, but like for them, violence or fighting is the last resort. They are kind of like living this utopian future where, for the most part, everybody gets along. Mutiny is unheard of in Starfleet, let alone fighting like this. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, do you think we'll ever get there before you and I are tossed into the black hole of death? I know.
No, Steve,
I know. I just wanted to hear you say it. That's all.
I'm not sure humanity's going to get there, Peter, but the way things are going.
Right.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyways, so they identified that the survivor that was found earlier in the turbo lift, his name's Hagen, and he's laying on a bed in sickbay there. He can only communicate a little bit telepathically with Troy, but he's not really saying much, and it doesn't make sense. He says something about how he hears voices, but we don't really get any other info. And one thing I always thought was really funny, and this is pretty much in every version of Star Trek, even the newer ones, like their sickbay, like, and I don't know, maybe it's like this in like military operations, but the beds are just like out in the open.
Right.
So you're just like lying in the middle of a room. People are just walking around you. Like they can see your chart.
Right. You could be getting like a rectal exam, and like in comes
or a vasectomy.
In comes Geordi, and he's like, I want you to read these books, and it's like, I'm in the middle of something. Come on.
Can't you see? He's like, no, I'm blind actually.
Now this sounds hilarious. We're gonna make a parody Star Trek movie someday.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, we don't really get any info from Hagen, or Troy, I should say, isn't able to get anything from him other than he hears voices.
Right.
We go back to being aboard the Britannia. Data and Geordi LaForge and Commander Riker are over there now. They unsuccessfully try from the bridge of the Britannia to figure out the engine malfunctions. Their goal is to like try and get the engines fired up, get it back to the nearest starbase. They try to fire up the engines, but they won't engage. And LaForge is really confused about it, as is Data, because they've determined that there isn't anything actually wrong with the engines. Like everything should be working just fine.
They were perplexed, all right.
Yes, they were. Then we have Crusher reports to Picard in his ready room. The ready room is kind of like an office that's off the bridge where Picard goes and, I don't know, reads Shakespeare whenever he's like is sick of sitting on the bridge staring at stars.
Right.
So yeah, Picard did his ready room. Crusher tells him that there's no indication of psychological or physiological diseases in the autopsies of the crew. But there was this growing madness that was obvious that was happening aboard the Britannia, and she knows that from their logs. So she pulls up the log of the captain of the Britannia, a Captain Zahiva. Chantal Zahiva. What a name. Anyway, so basically in the log entry, we see that Zahiva's like mental condition has been deteriorating. She describes plots and to like mutiny against her. And because of this, in the log, she says that she had her first officer, Commander Brink, eliminated, aka killed, executed for suspicion of mutiny. We also learn in the scene that all 34 members of the crew, this is a small ship, killed each other, and no aliens were detected aboard.
Wow. I mean, they're just ratcheting up the tension here.
Yeah. This is a very strong Act 1. We're almost done with it. Then we see that Counselor Troy. So it's weird because like they just cut to like Counselor Troy being like in like clouds and like green clouds.
Yeah, that was weird. I was like, is she on the holodeck or something? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's really weird. So she's like, we talked about it earlier. She's like blue screened in these like clouds, and it's weird because it both looks good and bad. It's a good chroma key. You don't see like any edges around her, so it's good in that sense. But it looks pretty hokey, like with this field of clouds on the close-ups. However, when they do the camera shot from behind her, where she's like floating, and you see her from far away, it looks way better there because they added some actual like real practical fog and stuff to kind of give it some depth.
Right.
But anyways, I'm sure you have opinions about this scene, so I'm going to ask you about that in just a second. But she's like floating around, and she's like asking, "Where are you?" She hears like a voice talking to her, and she just goes, "Where are you?"
That's
She says it very awkwardly, maybe because she was scared. I don't know.
Yeah, that was.
But we hear
they should have ADR'd that.
Yeah. We hear the phrases repeated from the unidentified voice that say "eyes in the dark," and we also hear "one moon circles." Troy is kind of going towards these two lights, and the two lights basically look like the two stars in this binary system that they found the Britannia adrift in. She wakes up from her dream. She's startled, breathing heavily. This is when we finally know it's a dream.
Right.
What did you think, Steve, about that?
I mean, yeah, it was kind of took me. It took me out of it. Yeah, out of nowhere. I mean, I wouldn't say it took me out of it, but like after a while, it's like, oh, I get it. She was. I think what my mind said was that, oh, she was just in some weird sort of telepathic, whatever. I didn't even think that she was dreaming. I thought that like maybe when she closes her mind, like in order to communicate with, whoever she's trying to communicate with.
Oh, so you thought maybe she was talking to Hagen, and this is kind of how it is in her mind.
That's exactly what I was thinking, but
I can see that.
Yeah, but apparently not.
I get what they were going for. They were trying to like have it be like, oh, surprise, she was dreaming, but I think it would have been more effective show her dreaming like onto the bed first, kind of struggling, and then cut to like the scene in her dream.
Right. And as far as like the actual effects inside the void, I mean. When they do shoot behind her, it's obvious that she's like in a harness and stuff. Like, I mean, I'm sure they were doing the best with what they had, like at the time.
Yeah, Marina Sirtis can't actually fly.
No, I mean, I'm just saying the harness was obvious. That's all. She can't. She can do anything. She's a woman. No, I mean, all in all, I would say with the effects that they had access to at the time, I think the floating void was pretty cool. And I mean, I liked it overall because I like floating voids.
And it's 1991, right. And like for me with blue screen and green screen effects from that era, like my big thing is I hate when I see the outline of the green screen. Sure. That always takes me out of it. And they do
that means it failed as like an effect if you can tell it,
Yeah. So and especially with this being kind of like a greenish gray void, and I wonder if they did that partially to help hide the halo. Clever. Which is smart. Hey, that's smart. And it also looks weird, so
sure.
Could have been better, could have been worse. For 1991, it's pretty good.
Right. I agree.
All right, so Act 2. So there hasn't been really any progress made. So in getting the Britannia under its own power to leave the area, so Picard decides to have the Britannia towed by a tractor beam to Starbase 220. Is that your favorite Starbase?
Oh, I'm more of a 221 guy, but 220's okay. Ooh. It's banging.
Okay. Well, all right. So unfortunately, we start to see that the crew of the Enterprise start to begin they start to experience their own issues. There's an increase in irritability and fatigue amongst the crew. There's no readily available explanation for it. On the Britannia, LaForge is unusually frustrated when he can't figure out why the engines won't work. And one thing I like about the way that they show the frustration is, for the most part, they have it like build up within people slowly throughout the episodes. Like he kind of does like a small outburst where he's like, "Oh, why isn't this working?" Which is out of character for him, but he doesn't like go nuts.
Right.
In fact, as soon as he sees the ensign that's there with him, kind of freaking out about voices that he thinks he's hearing, Geordi immediately, he's his usual self, says, "Hey, calm down. There were a lot of people killed here, so it's just your nerves playing tricks on you, which is normal." He does a good job of empathizing. He's a good leader,
For sure.
Wish I had a manager that cared for me like that.
Wow. Well, we can talk about that off air if you like.
Actually, my current boss is pretty good, actually.
Oh, in case he or she is listening. The thing that I think is interesting here is like, you say that they kind of like build to the sort of out of character moments, whereas in Genesis, it was like 0 to 100 in like 2.5 seconds, which I mean, both have their charm, to say the least.
Right, and both can. I mean, you can do 0 to 100 and have it be effective with the right writing, the right setup. We did not necessarily see that in Genesis for each of the characters that went 0 to 100. So yeah, Ensign Peoples, which is the one that's with LaForge, he freaks out of the voices. And then after Geordi calms him down, so we cut to Counselor Troy back in sickbay. She's able to telepathically communicate a little bit more with Hagen, but he's still, kind of saying very vague phrases that she can't quite make out what's the meaning of them. We cut to Chief O'Brien and Keiko in their quarters. I believe at this point they got married earlier in this season. Doesn't really matter. Keiko enters their quarters, and she starts telling about their day, but O'Brien kind of picks a fight. He basically is jealous about what he says, like, oh, yeah, you're just going there to spend more time with Tom Corbin, one of your coworkers. So, yeah, and I don't know. I love the way O'Brien, like, just the way he delivers the lines,
It's awesome. And this is my representation in Star Trek. An Irish dude married to an Asian woman.
This is
that's me.
So I don't know if you know, Steve, but because O'Brien ends up being a regular in DS9, and there's a lot of episodes where he's heavily featured. Keiko is in a lot of episodes, and for whatever reason, the fandom kind of jokingly, but kind of not jokingly, like kind of thinks of her as a nag. There's sometimes where she's like, Miles.
Oh no.
That's like So I don't know if that's something relatable to you, Steve. I'm not. You don't have to air this, but maybe start watching Deep Space Nine behind your wife's back, and
hey,
how you feel.
I've always been a DS9 fan, but one of these days I'll have to binge the whole series.
You never finished it?
I mean, I just like with all of them, I just watched episodes here and there back in the day.
Well, do you know it becomes like serialized at one point? Right?
Yeah, you told me all about it.
Yes. All right, we'll move on. For now.
I'm about to get fired, everyone.
So O'Brien and Keiko, Keiko is like, actually, Keiko finds it cute or like charming at first. She's like, oh, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were jealous, which kind of speaks to O'Brien is usually like a guy with a pretty jovial nature.
Sure.
So again, this is him acting like way out of left field that she doesn't even like take it seriously almost. But O'Brien is pissed and he leaves. And then he goes to 10 forward, which is kind of like the bar of the ship.
That's the Irish thing to do.
Yep. you know where he was going before they showed.
Right, I did actually.
Alcoholism is in your blood. So he goes there and he's talking to another Chief Gillespie, about just kind of what's been going on. And O'Brien, the Chief Gillespie is like telling him how like, oh, all these weird things are happening and blah, 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 blah. And O'Brien says, don't worry about it. It's just ghost stories. And O'Brien's super irritable throughout the whole conversation.
I love that. The sort of, planting the seeds of like, the discontent and the mutiny or whatever. Because I've just worked at so many terrible jobs. There's always that one or two guys who are just always, bitching about stuff. And this just feels very real. That's all.
Yeah, because I think, I know he definitely says it later, but I think here Gillespie alludes to something like, oh, some people think like it's a test. Like all the stuff that's going on, this weird stuff is a test from Picard or the higher ups, yada, yada. So he's already like kind of making up all these conspiracy theories, or at least buying into some of them. So then we cut to Picard, who is once again in his ready room, and he hears the door chime, like the doorbell ring. He says, come, which is usually what he says, but no one enters the room. The chime keeps repeating. He says, come, nobody's opening the door. He finally goes to the door. It opens and no one's there. So Picard's like, all right, whatever. He walks back, obviously irritated. He sits down and the door starts chime starts going off again, and he's just like, whatever, and he's just like ignoring it. And then finally someone starts knocking. And I think this is the only time someone on the Enterprise knocks on a door throughout the whole series.
How pedestrian. That's so 20th century.
So small. Yeah. Anyways, Picard, lets them in. And at the door, we have Troy, Counselor Troy, and Dr. Crusher. And one thing I really like about this episode is that we see all of the characters are used just about evenly, which is not something that's very typical in TNG. Actually, in most Star Trek shows, it tends to be this is a Picard episode or this is a Data episode. I mean, a lot of them are TNG are like Picard, Data,
Riker.
I guess Riker to a lesser extent, but so that's one thing I personally really like about this episode. Everybody has something to do.
Yeah, it's a nice ensemble piece.
Yeah. So anyway, they Troy and Crusher come in. They say that the occurrences of paranoia, erratic behavior, and hallucinations aboard the ship are continuing to escalate. So Captain Picard ends up telling them that, Troy and Crusher are like, yeah, we need to get the ship. We need to get out of here. And Picard's like, well, great. We're about to tractor the Britannia out of here. So goes out to the bridge. Picard gives the order to, send a tractor beam and put in the coordinates. He tells the ensign put in the coordinates to get us the fuck out of here to Starbase 221, the good Starbase.
Yeah, not this piece of trash.
The sexy one, not 220. Anyways, the ensign starts acting all weird and confused, and she can't remember how to enter the coordinates, which is what she says out loud. Picard tells her to, go to sickbay, and he calls over another ensign to sit there.
Wait. Can I just jump in there real quick? I love how it just shows how easily replaceable you are on the Enterprise. What's that? You got a hangnail. All right, you go to sick bay. Bam, we got another jabroni in here to sit in the...
Now, wait a minute. Now, Steve, to be fair, this is a very common thing that happens on not just TNG, but all the Star Trek episodes. And the reason why there's always somebody on standby to fill in these other posts is if something comes up, oh God, we have this emergency that just happened. Okay, we have to beam an away team. And okay, I want the person that's at the helm right now to go. They need somebody that's already there to take over.
Right. No, I mean, it makes sense, but I mean, it's basically if you work at a retail store that's actually well-staffed, which I don't believe I've ever worked at one, someone gets sick, bam, they got somebody there to fill in for them. Of course, that's not how America works in 2022. Boom, topical.
No.
But yeah, I just love it. It's like, oh, you're sick? Go. Okay, got this guy here. Come on up here, Johnny. You can fly now.
Yeah. And I will say both of the ensigns, the one that gets replaced and the one replacing her, they're both regular, reoccurring Helms people on the show. I don't think they ever get, I think the woman does get a name. I don't think the guy ever gets a name throughout the series. But I always appreciated that. They always had kind of regular people doing the
Do you
those
think
jobs.
those
Anyways,
guys they have a TikTok now where they're just like, hey, if you loved me on Star Trek TNG, look at what I'm up to now. And
it wouldn't surprise me. The Dell guy.
I've seen it. He's popped up on my FYP. Oh my God. Yeah. And you know what? I was going to save it for the end.
He's pretty charming.
But since we're talking about TikTok, we finally have our first 10K TikTok video. It was the Super Mario Brothers erotic one. People are
okay. So I did see that. Yeah,
they're still talking about it. It's great.
Yeah. Well, sex sells, and the producers of the Super Mario Brothers Super Show knew that apparently
from episode 1.
Yeah. And I guess our TikTok views prove them correct.
Yep, they sure do.
I'm glad that we're part of the problem, Steve. Anyways, so the ensign, the new ensign punches in the coordinates or whatever, and they go to tow the ship, and now the Enterprise's impulse engines aren't working. Picard says use warp then. Warp engines aren't working, and now, just like the Britannia, the Enterprise has no working propulsion systems, even though everything should be working.
Mm-hmm. Gasp.
Dun dun.
Yeah.
Close of Act 2. So what do you think so far?
I've loved everything so far. I mean, I might be reaching, but maybe since it had so much to do with dreams and stuff, I was getting real, like, sort of almost Lynchian vibes, if you will. Twin Peaks vibes, especially with the floating void. If anyone watches any David Lynch stuff, you know, there's always voids of some kind that show up at some point in whatever it is he's making, usually. And I was loving it. And of course, I am the writer and creator of the show or the podcast Ray Can't Sleep. So when they haven't even revealed that it's like a dream thing yet, but I've always been fascinated with dreams and sleep and stuff because I've always had problems with dreams and sleeping and stuff. So yeah, this was right up my alley.
So it's glad you brought up Twin Peaks because I kind of got those vibes too. But did you feel like Hagen, the actor that played Hagen, looked a little bit like, I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy from Twin Peaks,
Kyle MacLachlan?
Yeah, I think that's his name.
Yeah. I guess he does. Yeah, kind of a similar haircut.
Yeah, like I actually thought. Let me see if that's him. Wait, no.
Oh no,
that's not who I'm thinking of. The guy with the dark hair and Twin Peaks.
Okay. I think I know who you might be talking about. Bobby, maybe, or I think I know who you're talking about.
He's like one of the main guys. Why can't I?
Well, I mean, Kyle MacLachlan.
You're gonna have to edit this out.
Has
hold on.
Dark hair.
Hold on. Let me go to the TV series.
Man, I gotta learn.
Are you sure his name is Tom?
Tom?
Are you sure his name is Tom MacLachlan?
No, Kyle. Kyle MacLachlan.
Kyle. Okay, yeah.
So that's who you think he looks like?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Yeah. So we're in agreement.
Yes. Yeah.
You were just mishearing.
I thought you said Tom MacLachlan.
No. Kyle.
Did you know that Kyle MacLachlan was in? He did I think it was a TV movie called like Jules Verne's Mysterious Island, and Patrick Stewart is in it.
Ooh, that sounds fun. Did you know he was also in Showgirls for some reason?
He is. Oh no, I do know the reason. A paycheck.
Yeah,
and you know what? Good for him.
Well, I think a lot of people. All right, this is a side track, but I think people thought Showgirls was actually going to be something since it was directed by Paul Verhoeven, the director of such films as RoboCop and Basic Instinct, but then it ended up just being Showgirls.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean it's fun to watch.
Sure. Oh yeah.
If you watch it like for the laughs.
Oh yeah. I mean it's a camp classic according to. Yeah.
So anyways, we open up on Act 3 after the commercials, and we learned that the Enterprise, I think it's from a captain's log from Picard, that the Enterprise has been adrift for 10 days. And due to how isolated and distant their location is, they will not get assistance for at least 2 weeks, which kind of harkens back to the very beginning of the episode where they say, hey, we've been looking for the ship, and we found them in an unexplored star system. Mm-hmm. And considering... This is getting like real geeky into Star Trek stuff, but considering like there's maps of like of the quadrants of the Milky Way and how much has been explored and how much hasn't, and considering how much has been explored for them to be in an unexplored area of the Alpha Quadrant, they would be within the lore very far away. So if you're like a nerd, you like love hearing this explanation.
So is this Tychon's Rift? Has that ever been in an episode before, or is that like an actual thing that happens within space, or is it just a Star Trek thing?
I believe this is the first time it's mentioned. I'm sure it's not a real thing.
Okay.
And if it is, I'm sure it might be like a theoretical thing. Because especially the Star Trek shows from that era, like they had science advisors that would make sure the science would make some kind of sense and that kind of stuff. I do believe Tychon's Rift gets mentioned in an episode of Voyager where they're stuck also, like some kind of anomaly, and somebody says something like, could it be a Tychon's Rift? And I think they even referenced this episode.
Nice.
But, yeah. So anyways, the Enterprise, like I said, it's been adrift for 10 days. They're not going to get help for a couple of weeks. In the observation lounge, which is kind of like a conference lounge where like the crew meets, the bridge crew, the senior officers meet to discuss matters. Dave is doing like a little presentation where he's reporting that they're actually trapped in a space-time anomaly known as Tychon's Rift. Anyways, I'm not going to get into... so it's named after a guy named Bella Tychon. and he had escaped a similar rift by detonating some cargo he had. It had these two compounds, anisium and urium. Anyways, they were highly combustible. They created a lot of energy. And the Enterprise doesn't have the energy to reproduce that situation. Also, the weird thing is that the Tychon's Rift didn't cause this unusual behavior, as far as they knew, that the crew was having and that the crew of the Britain obviously had. So one thing I really liked is that during the meeting, while Data is talking, Worf arrives late. Very unusual for him
that
to
was
be late.
So funny. I was detained.
Yeah. He like sits down, like they don't show everybody look at him, but they show him, his face, like as if everyone's looking at him. He's like, I was deterred. So he sits down, and the one thing I really like is like as Data continues to talk, like where Worf is sitting, it's kind of he's like the last one at the far end of the shot. He's almost a little out of focus, but he's still like throughout the whole like meeting, like fidgeting and very like
obviously
unsure himself, which is great.
The meth. Space meth.
Yeah, he's on edge, right? Yeah, he's on space meth, so you can see that he's on edge, which very unusual for Worf. Because even if Worf is feeling, out of sorts, he's not going to show it publicly because he's, has to be tough Klingon guy. So, anyways, during the meet, sorry about that. As the crew talks, we can see Worf being fidgety. Okay, so after the meeting, Picard and Riker, they are in the turbo lift. They're going to head up to the bridge. And Picard starts asking him, how he's doing. And Riker says that he's okay for the moment. When he goes to his quarters, he feels like someone is there watching him or waiting for him. And that he says, I admit I have to bite my tongue to like stop from snapping at people. So Picard kind of says, yeah, I've had the same feelings about somebody watching me. And Picard says, hey, we have to make sure we're the leaders of the ship. We need to keep our faculties intact. You go take a little nap.
It would have been funnier if Riker was like, yes, I have to bite my tongue to keep from snapping at people. In fact, I'm doing it right now. And then give each other the most like angry look. And then after like an awkward silence, Picard's like, go take a nap.
That would have been great. Or, since Riker's like the ladies' man, he's like, I have to bite my tongue to keep from shoving it down people's throats.
Even better. Yeah, for sure.
So Picard tells him, hey, take a nap for a few hours, and then you can relieve me, and I'll sleep for a few hours. Riker obeys, and as soon as Riker leaves and the door to the turbo lift shuts, we see like Picard's whole like demeanor change. He just starts to look very uneasy, but again, it's noticeable, but it's subtle.
Right. I mean,
like it's. I don't know how Patrick Stewart does it, because it's like not only is he uneasy, but it's like you can also get from his face that he's uneasy about being uneasy.
That's the genius of Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, that man is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyways, we cut to Riker's quarters. He's like walking around towards his. You don't know that he's walking towards his bedroom, but I know the layout of his.
I'm sure you do.
Does that sound creepy, Steve?
No. Perfectly normal. Anyways, normal.
So he's kind of walking towards the bathroom and bedroom area, and he hears like these sounds, these weird creaking sounds, which are pretty creepy. And I forgot that they did that, and it makes sense because there's no wood, there's no creaking on the Enterprise.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, that would throw anybody off. Mm-hmm. Anyways, he kind of scratches his head. You can tell it's bothering him, but he goes, gets ready for bed. We're back in the turbo lift with Picard, but suddenly he starts to feel like the turbo lift ceiling is coming down on him, and they definitely did not have the budget to lower the actual ceiling.
Right.
So they like basically just kind of like push the camera up towards the ceiling to make it seem like it's coming down, and they like do a shot where like they have Picard in the same shot, and they're also kind of like pushing the camera up. So it comes. You get what they mean, but it's still kind of like, eh.
Yeah, that was all Patrick Stewart. They're like, look, buddy, we don't have enough to make the ceiling come down, so you're really gonna have to sell this. It reminds me of Ed Wood when Bela Lugosi has to fight that rubber squid costume in the water, and it's like not even alive or connected to strings or anything.
Yeah. But Stewart makes it work. Patrick, and part of it too that I think makes it work is that it's a hallucination. It's not really coming down on him.
Right.
So the turbo lift door opens. It opens to the bridge, and Patrick Stewart's just like yelling, like, "Oh!" And
it's a good impression.
yeah, as the door opens and everybody in the bridge like kind of looks at him, and then he awkwardly looks at them. He kind of gets up, doesn't even address it, which I kind of love. He's like, fuck it.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, it's like, say something. I dare you. I'm the captain, motherfucker.
Don't they ask him if he's okay or something?
Yeah,
or is everything all right? He goes, yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And then he walks to his ready room.
It's okay. I'm British.
Yeah. We're back in Riker's quarter. He's now wearing this sexy blue set of pajamas.
Right. It's so...
What did you think about these pajamas?
I mean, I think it's weird seeing Starfleet people in their pajamas, especially... I think previously they showed Deanna Troi in her pajamas, and it's weird. It's like not quite lingerie, and I get that they don't want it to be, sexy or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. But what she's wearing, I don't know, feels like something from ancient Greece or something, like a weird toga or something like that.
So, Steve, this is the second appearance of that article of clothing she was wearing. And there is the other appearance it makes is before this, I'm pretty sure. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, she's like possessed by like some kind of thing or whatever.
Sure, as you do.
And when she answers her door wearing it, and her nipples are poking right through it. Like she's not wearing a bra or anything underneath. You can see like everything pretty much. Wow. Like I was shocked that they let this go on. She's supposed to be like seducing somebody, and yeah. And when I saw it come up, I'm like, oh my God, is this another one of those where they have her nipples sticking through? But not this time.
They were really desperate for ratings on that episode.
No, they weren't. They were like, dude, TNG was killing it in the ratings.
Well, so what do you think the purpose of it was? Someone just wanted to see Deanna Troi's nipples?
Marina is a pretty free spirit, and like before this, she's like been like topless and nude in other movies. Oh yeah,
I know she was a canon regular. Maybe not regular, but she was in a few canon movies.
Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if like in the episode where like, her nipples or whatever, and like, cause she's like a main focus of that episode. She's like, hey, if I'm supposed to be like doing this like character that's not like Deanna Troi normally is, and she's like this seductress, I should play it up. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was her idea.
Woo!
She's gung ho about shit. I mean, not just that, just like about, whatever is necessary for the part.
Right, of course. I mean, that's because you've got a great cast of like really good actors. So
yeah. So anyways, back to Riker and his sexy blue pajamas. He goes into bed. He's got a holographic pillow, as you do in the future.
I can't wait. One of these days, we're going to be sponsored by Holographic Pillow. It's going to be awesome.
Dude, and sometimes, like in some of the beds in TNG, the pillow is just like a thin triangle. And you're just like, well, it's the future. I guess it's somehow comfortable.
Right.
It's futuristic thin triangle that somehow comforts them perfectly. Anyway, I lost my place in my notes here. Blah, blah, blah. Cut to Riker's room. Sexy blue pajamas. All right. So he still looks very paranoid as he heads to bed. He's like looking around. He gets in bed and he sees that it's a... I see what happened in my notes. I kind of got them backwards here. Gets into bed. He like feels something weird. He rips his covers off, and there's a bunch of snakes around his legs and feet. He like gets up, scared, kind of closes his eyes, opens them again, and now the snakes are gone.
Right.
The bed is empty.
So is that supposed to be almost like sort of like a sleep paralysis kind of thing? Because like he wasn't actually asleep. Like, what exactly is the explanation for seeing the snakes, you think?
Oh, they go into it later.
All right.
They explain that they hallucinate. They explain why everyone's having hallucinations.
Oh yeah, I mean, right. Okay, I remember now. Never mind. Continue.
Yeah, you idiot. How dare you?
Hey, don't get mad at me. I'm just a regular Starfleet janitor over here.
All right, so we're back in Picard's ready room, and Data is in there with him. Data tells Picard that he and LaForge think that reusing the deflector dish modifications that they previously used against the Borg might let them break off the rift. And this is talking about stuff that happened end of season 3, beginning of season 4. where they were fighting the Borg in this big two-parter where Picard got assimilated by the Borg. So this is also very rare for this era of Star Trek to refer to like previous episodes, because everything kind of, they wanted it to be like it could be aired out of order in syndication and people wouldn't be wondering what was going on. So this is a pretty rare that they did that. Anyways, we can see that Picard's like kind of like, you know, starting to like not be quite as with it.
Right.
And he's a little fatigued. You know, Picard feels like that the turbolift incident that happened was enough to make him feel like he needs Data to like kind of be the backup. And he tells him like, hey, Data, you know, I think like your presence gonna be needed for our survival.
Step up, Data. Yeah.
Yeah, if we can't find a solution to leave the Titan's Rift before then. So the funny thing is Picard gives Data these orders, you know, to act on his own initiative, carry out his duties whenever, you know, Picard falters, and become acting captain whenever he feels it's necessary. And, you know, like I said, he says, you know, the entire crew's survival may depend on you. Very gravely. And Data, as an emotionless android, just says, I'll do my best.
Yeah. Classic. Classic Data. That's why everyone loves him.
It is great. So, yeah, I guess we should mention that Data's not affected by the hallucinations. Obviously, he's an android.
Right.
So he doesn't, you know, he's not I almost said a mammal.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's not.
And I mean, according to the synopsis, like neither is Guinan and Troy. I mean, but
right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get to Guinan. I have it in my notes. When we see her next, I'll explain why she's not affected. Because it is one of those things where, like, I guess you would only really know it if you're a regular viewer,
right,
of the series. They don't explain why she's not affected.
But
yeah, and then,
wait, let me see if I can remember. It's because she's like an empath or something, isn't she? Something like that?
She is something, and she is somewhat of an empath, but it's not because she's an empath.
Oh, okay.
Because she's not telepathic.
Right. Not telepathic, but empathic, where it's more like being able to sense someone's like emotions better or something like that.
Not exactly. It's more like she can sense the universe than
so
people.
Cosmic awareness?
Really,
Jesus Christ!
Kind of. like her race isn't like, they're not all like great at talking to people like she is. Like that's just like her thing. Like she's not like that because of her race.
Wow. So you're telling me that Guinan is on par with the Silver Surfer and Galactus?
Something like that.
Wow.
Something like that.
Amazing.
All
right, let's continue.
All right. So anyways, Data says, I'll do my best. Then we cut to the morgue, which is this is one of my favorite scenes, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. So we cut to the morgue. This is the one and only time I recall seeing the morgue.
Yeah, right?
But it makes sense. I mean, you don't really deal with a lot of episodes where they have to like take, 30-something dead people right, on board. But anyways, it's filled with the bodies, the dead bodies, obviously, of the Brittain crew. Each body has its own kind of bed that it's on, and it's over the body is like a semi-transparent plastic tarp. Excuse me. Blah blah blah. It's dimly lit, like I mentioned earlier, and we're starting to see more and more of the as the episode goes on. I should mention more of the sets be like more and more dimly lit, more of the regular sets, which is a great little subtle way, I feel like, to like kind of ramp up, the dire situation, how it's becoming worse.
Absolutely.
Dr. Crusher is going to take brain tissue scans of all the dead Brittain personnel in the morgue, and she's going to compare them to the Enterprise crew's brain scans to see, like, if she can find anything. So Crusher removes one of the tarps from one of the dead Brittain crew members to scan them. She thinks she hears a sound, looks around, nothing, seems to be amiss, moves on to the next body, does the scan, hears a sound again, and the way that they shot this was great because it's like this close-up of like, where you really can only see Crusher from like maybe like mid-torso up. You don't see anything else. And then when they kind of like pan back and as she turns around, all of the dead bodies are now like sitting upright.
Yeah. It was really, really effectively done. I mean, kind of like a classic sort of horror movie trope, but it's interesting seeing it transplanted here in the world of Star Trek, and
which is why I think it works, because it's such an overused generic thing, but you don't expect it here.
No, it definitely works, and just adds to everything that's come before it. I mean, I almost wish, and this is kind of like my wish almost for the entire episode, that maybe, and I get that Star Trek is subtle more or less, like maybe some of those body bags could have started walking towards her, but instead it's just like a blink and then bam, it's back to normal.
Yeah, you're pretty much right, because she sees them, she kind of starts backing up, she kind of like rubs against a couple, then she like closes her eyes, says go away, opens her eyes, and the bodies are laying down again.
Right.
So yeah, it is kind of like very quick. Yeah. So I totally get what you're saying, because like it's almost like they're going, and I wonder if a lot of this has to do too with the fact that it's supposed to be like a family show still, for general syndication. Because I know like there's a season 1 episode where Phaser's acting weird, like basically Starfleet's being taken over by these like insect things that go into people's mouth, takes over their brain, and they're taking over Starfleet. Anyways, Picard and Riker go to find the leader, go to shoot him, and they make his head explode, his whole body explode, basically like his chest explodes, and like a creature comes out of there. They start shooting that, and then it explodes, and it was super bloody, and it was like a big problem apparently, and like a lot of like affiliates were like very upset about how gory it was.
Yeah, the 90s was a weird time. Like when I look back on it, I just mostly I just feel or think about like all the action movies that I watched, because that was such a popular genre at the time.
Right.
But I keep forgetting that this is like before peak TV in the early 2000s, like before shows like obviously way before like Dexter and Sons of Anarchy were really like pushing the envelope. And plus those shows were on like cable channels, whereas Star Trek was still on network TV. So
not even, it was being syndicated.
Right.
It was,
so it had to, adhere to some pretty strict and foolish laws about graphic violence and or gore.
Yeah. And this is also before TV ratings. So at least when TV ratings came into play, you could kind of get away with more because you could label it as like, hey, this is for this age group, right?
Right.
So anyways, after Crusher has this frightening experience, she joins Data and Picard in Picard's ready room. Crusher has a hypothesis after comparing the brain scans that the rampant outbreaks of violence aboard both the Britannia and the Enterprise are due to a lack of REM sleep, which is basically the state you enter when you have a dream.
Right.
Or can dream while you're sleeping. She says that it talks about how it leads to fatigue, loss of concentration, extreme irritability, hostility, and ultimately insanity.
Can I just jump in there and say, as someone who works the night shift, Friday,
you're insane, right?
Friday through Monday. Yeah, by the time I get done with my shift, yeah, I mean basically, I'm slowly becoming insane towards the end of my run, and then basically I recover from my 3 days off, and then I start the whole process over and over again. It's not affecting me in the slightest, I promise.
Dude, I had a long time ago somebody that I was in a relationship with, and that we had like these crazy opposite schedules, and I would like stay up to like hang out with them, and then after a while I was like, hey, I can't do this like every night anymore, and they were real upset about it. I'm like, well, I can't, I'm like really like irritable all the time, and like so I'm angry, like everything like bothers me and pisses me off. So yeah, I totally get it, man. Like, and at this point it's already been 10 plus days,
right?
Probably like 2 weeks at least, because it's been like at least a few more days since they told us it was 10 days. So yeah, man, like 14 days of not getting REM sleep. Yeah, I'd be in jail.
Yeah.
All right. So anyways, she said that it's not clear. It's not clear that this is not being caused by the Titan's Rift or another force at work. So Crusher doesn't really know what's causing it, but she says that Troy's the only person on the ship that's able to dream. Maybe it's because she's Betazoid, but that all of her dreams are nightmares. Crusher says that she thinks the crew of the Enterprise is going to eventually meet the same fate as the Britannia, since the brain scans of both crews match. Picard and Crusher both looked very confused and agitated throughout the scene. Like Data helps finish their sentences a lot of times, and
Right.
you can tell that they're both kind of like losing it.
He also finished their sandwiches as well.
Yes, as you do, because androids are hungry boys.
Right. Yes, they are.
All right.
Man.
So what do you think? Because at this point, obviously, they need to kind of start getting towards the resolution.
Yeah.
So what do you think of it so far?
I mean, the explanation is great. I mean, we haven't even got the reveal yet, right?
No, not really.
So yeah, like once again, I love stuff that involves sleep, and just hearing that basically the crew of the Enterprise is going nuts because they can't reach REM sleep is like pretty brilliant. Like a pretty brilliant concept. I mean, I'm probably going to rip this off and use it in a comic book or something later because
hey, I'm sure they ripped it off something.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, or excuse me, inspired by, borrowed by, and yeah, I'm loving it, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing the resolution to how those crazy old Starfleet boys gonna get out of this one.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why it works well is because it's not like something new, but because you're used to seeing this is the crew of the Enterprise. They're like the best of the best in Starfleet,
right?
And the people in Starfleet are already like the best of their planets.
Sure.
These are people who are usually very professional. They got their shit together outside of a few small exceptions.
Riker and his womanizing.
Hey, he's the best of the best at womanizing. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's true.
So it kind of works because like you don't get to see these characters act like this.
Right.
So it just adds to the strangeness to it for a regular viewer. Anyways, we're back in sickbay, which is now super darkly lit. Troy has another quick green cloud nightmare while she's sitting next to Hagen, who's like on his bed still.
Sure.
She kind of falls asleep because she's so fatigued due to the nightmare she's been having. She continues listening to Hagen, who now, the new bit of information we get is that he says double.
Right.
And she kind of like remarks, she starts talking to Crusher, Troy starts talking to Crusher about how, with Betazoids and humans, even though like the humans can't dream, yeah, she can, but the dreams are like nightmares, so it's making her crazy. So she's going to end up in the same situation. Like these dreams are driving her crazy, and she can barely sleep because of them. We see that meanwhile that the rest of the crew is still behaving irrationally. We go to 10 forward again, and again, I think it's Chief Gillespie is still talking about how he thinks that Picard is testing them.
Oh yeah,
and he is like yells that they should fight, what's going on, both the hallucinations and the tests.
Right. Yeah. Just basically rise up and show Picard what's what, I guess.
Yeah. And you can see some people are agreeing with them, and Guinan is kind of like, what the fuck?
Right.
And we cut to Data and LaForge. They're over in engineering. You can see LaForge is distracted and trying to, do his best. They're going to execute Data's plan of using the Data and LaForge's plan of using the deflector burst to disrupt the Titan's rift. LaForge is losing his concentration, so kind of Data has to jump in and help him out. But whatever they did with the deflector dish, it's unsuccessful. The thing they sent out just gets absorbed.
Right.
Worf, we see him on the bridge, and Worf, you can see like he feels like deflated that this didn't work with the deflector attempt. And he just kind of like I think he like doesn't he like put his arms around himself or something. He does something weird with his body. I can't remember what it is, but he's so helpless. He like leaves the bridge and he like goes to his quarters and he pulls out a knife and he's getting ready to commit ritual Klingon suicide.
Jesus, like, do you think like back in the time of the samurai, like when they started getting sleep deprived, they were just like, I gotta end this shit. Like.
Well, Steve, the funny thing is, like, this is a recurring thing with Klingons, actually. This is one of 3 times I can think of that Klingon ritual suicide comes up between TNG and DS9. The other time it comes up is with Worf. I think it's maybe next season, though, where, like, basically he becomes paralyzed from the neck down, and Crusher can't fix it, and he asks Riker to basically kill him because he can't commit the ritual suicide himself. And it's the same ritual suicide.
Right. So
it's the same knife.
Isn't it safe to say that, like, at least Klingons in the TNG world are kind of like the samurai of the galaxy?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. So and the whole reason is it's not so much because Worf is like, oh, woe is me per se. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but basically he's like, I'm no longer a Klingon warrior. I'm constantly afraid.
Right. Yes.
I'm gonna act dishonorably. Mm-hmm. So I shouldn't be allowed to live. And I think like the subtext for like fans of TNG is that he's probably more worried about doing something to other people really than him being scared, because that would be very dishonorable.
Right. I mean, it makes.
And the Klingons are
I mean, it makes sense for the character to want to commit ritual suicide for sure.
Right. And I like that they didn't just like do the 0 to 60 thing in this episode like they did in Genesis, where like we saw him in the background having issues. We know he's been having issues for a while. He didn't turn into an immediate poison spitting monster. Like last time.
Right. Not this time.
So anyways, Troy, using her Betazoid sensor, she could tell like something was up with Worf, so she had kind of like went to his quarters. She burst in just about as he's about to kill himself. She stops him, convinces him not to, tells him like the fact that he can, because he tells her like, hey, I'm afraid, and then she's like, hey, the fact that you can admit you're afraid, that's a source of strength. If you weren't strong, you wouldn't be able to do that. And Troy, very uncharacteristically for Worf, takes him by the hand like a child and guides him to sickbay.
See, I like that. I thought that they were gonna have to like call in security and like wrestle the knife away.
Well, they do,
but they don't.
She does call security.
But they
right.
don't have to
Troy
wrestle the knife away. Like he, listens to her and allows himself to be led to sickbay, which I think sort of saves the character's dignity, if you will.
Right. And once security does come in, she's already kind of convinced him not to, and they're like, is everything okay? And she's like, oh, everything's fine. Like, she doesn't give them any explanation. She's like, get the fuck out of here.
Nothing to see here, you extras.
Yeah. And this is I know there's a lot of background that maybe non-TNG fans don't care about, but later on in the series, Troy becomes sort of a surrogate mother to Worf's son, and Worf and Troy end up like falling in love and having a relationship. And a lot of people were like, oh, that seems to have come out of nowhere. But like Worf and Troy have moments like this all throughout the series. So like I was always like, what are you talking about? Like there's always been like some level of trust he's had with her that he didn't with other, crew members for whatever reason.
Would you say it's almost kind of like a Beauty and the Beast style relationship, more or less?
I mean, I don't think Deanna Troy's that ugly, but...
Oh, you got me.
Yeah. Have you seen the new trailer for the new season 3 of Picard with like all the TNG cast?
I have not.
Well, they've got... I'll send you a still or a picture, a promo shot of Worf. The man aged very well. Very handsome. Good for him. Anyways, Act 5, which is that last act, Data has kind of assumed command here of the Enterprise since Picard and Riker aren't able to function very well. In a log, Data says that life support is beginning to falter.
Not good.
Presumably because they don't have anybody. He doesn't really explain it why, but presumably it's because they don't have the crew to do their usual jobs to upkeep the systems. And life support is tied generally, depending on the episode, into like the warp engines working correctly. So I would assume that's why. But anyways, we see that Troy has a breakthrough with Hagen. She figures out that he's been saying the same thing, or he starts to say the same thing she's been hearing in her nightmares, and reports to Picard in his ready room that she thinks that there are aliens trying to communicate telepathically because they are also trapped. And I suspect this is where like people that are not necessarily like Star Trek fans are like, oh, this is like a nice little horror mystery, kind of start to get lost by this episode. Because, sorry, you're about to say something?
I mean, I wouldn't say I felt lost. I was like, I just thought it was interesting. That's all. I'm like, oh, that's a it's a good. I mean, I didn't feel let down by that explanation. Like, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because in Star Trek, especially this era of Star Trek, there's 99.9% of the times there's gonna be a scientific explanation for whatever is going on.
Right.
That's part of the secular world
Sure.
of Star Trek. Anyways, so Data says that it's possible that their attempts to communicate telepathically. I should digress. So this episode does make the assumption that that there's like aliens in the world of Star Trek that only communicate telepathically. So naturally, that's why they're not getting like communications via the usual like hails or that kind of stuff. And this is not the first time that only telepaths aboard a starship were the ones that got like the message. So it's kind of keeping along with the lore, but if you're not aware of it, I can see how you might kind of want to be like, why didn't they just call them or whatever, send them a message, right? Anyways, Data says that it's possible telepathic communication is interfering with REM sleep of the non-Betazoid crew. He also agrees that there might be another ship caught by the Titan's rift, and if so, they could free themselves by maybe working together to create an explosion. So after that, Troy and Data go to the bridge's science station. They're kind of like looking through different elements that they have available to create or just have on board. Troy realizes that one moon circles refers to a hydrogen atom. Like the hydrogen atom like flashes by the screen. And if you know anything about science, you know that hydrogen atom is, one electron circling a single proton. Duh. I mean, they do teach you that. Like, well, at least when I was. Anyways, so basically the gist is that they think, okay, if the Enterprise releases hydrogen towards the other ship, and by the way, they think that the reason why they don't know that there's another ship is because it's on the opposite side of the stars, and because they've been like continuously adrift, they haven't seen it. So he says, hey, maybe if we send enough hydrogen towards the other ship, maybe they have something that they can combine with it to produce the necessary explosion. But Troy's like, well, what kind of message do we send? And Data says, like, well, if they're trying to if they've communicated to us what they need, all that we have to tell them is now. They've already sent us the message.
That was a good little ending there, in line for that scene.
Yeah. It was really good. It really spoke to they actually work really well together too, because like at one point, before Data realizes all we have to do is say now, Data suggests like a really complicated message or something, and Troy's like, no, that's too much. That's going to be too complicated, So they work really well together. Troy goes to sick bay to be put to sleep by Crusher. Data says that she's only going to have 2 minutes to send the message because they basically only have enough power to send hydrogen out of the bus bar collectors for like 2 minutes. So Data gets things ready. He talks to Picard about being ready for something, and Picard's like not really with it. So Data again assumes the role of acting captain. He ejects the hydrogen into space, and we see it flying out. Now, to get more power, Data orders over the ship's intercom systems for all of the crew to go to the designated emergency shelters so that areas that are unoccupied, they can take off the life support. I think I did this a little bit out of order, but anyways, we go back to the motley crew in 10 forward, and things have escalated. And I don't mean that Vince Neil is trying to sing when I say the motley crew in 10 forward and things escalating.
Good one.
Thank you. Anyway, so again, Gillespie's talking about how it's an experiment. He wants to mutiny. And then Guinan, who
he also said some stuff about
affected.
flat Earth, but we'll leave that out.
Yeah. And something about birds not being real.
Right.
But anyways, so Guinan, who isn't affected, or at least not nearly as affected, and she's an El-Aurian, which is a race of people that basically they live hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're not telepathic per se, but they have this weird connection to the universe, and they can sense when things are wrong, and things that affect normal humans tend to not affect them. And one of the things about them is like they've left a lot of things about them kind of mysterious, and I think it's for the best. Like the Q, you know how the Q are all powerful, omnipotent. The Q are afraid of Elarians for some reason, and it's revealed in Star Trek Picard, the new show, in season 2, that Elarians actually have a thing they can use to call on a Q to appear to them at any time, and the Q have to do it.
So, thus turning Q into basically a bunch of genies.
No, because they don't have to do it. They can just be summoned to have a discussion.
Oh, okay.
And the Q like have to respond to it. And when I say they have to, I don't mean like it's against their will. They've come to some agreement with the Elarians that when you do this, we'll come to you. So yeah, and like there's like another episode where like there's like this thing that happens suddenly. There's this alternate universe where like a character is alive that was killed in the first season, and the only person that can tell is Guinan, and she doesn't know why. So there's a lot of stuff like that her race can do. It's kind of a bit of a
almost a Deus Ex Machina, almost.
Kind of. I mean,
almost
like a narrator. She's almost like a narrator.
She's the Watcher from Marvel Comics.
That the characters can talk to. But except, unlike the Watchers in Marvel Comics, this Watcher doesn't exactly know what's going on. They just know something's up. And it's up to everybody else to figure it out. I see. Anyway, sorry for the digression there. So yeah, things are getting really rowdy in the bar, and Guinan pulls out a giant fucking gun that's like half her height. This big rifle. She shoots it in the air. These like horribly composited sparks come down from the ceiling. Then this makes everybody stop. Security had been called by Guinan. They enter, but the shock value of seeing her with the gun makes everybody stop. And she says something about like where she got the gun and how like that was like setting 1.
Do you want to see setting 3 or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah. She like.
I love that. It was the cheesiest sort of like action movie moment, and just to have her do it just made it hilarious and just sort of out of left field. I mean, perfect for Star Trek trying to be a horror, not trying to be, but just sort of embracing tropes, different tropes for this episode.
Of the genre.
I really like that.
Yeah. She became the barkeep that's ready to defend, her
just
bar.
Basically like Ash. It's like the name's Guinan, housewares, like.
Yeah, and then she's in. They bring her back for Star Trek Picard, and they show her like in the past when she was on Earth, and she was also a barkeep.
I saw that on Red Letter Media.
And I think I didn't like season 2 either overall, but I think they were a little unfair to like Picard's Guinan's character. But basically she's been like this hard ass the whole time. She'll be real sweet to you until you're a motherfucker.
Sure.
Anyways, Crusher puts Troy to sleep in sickbay and initiates REM sleep. Data activates the hydrogen stream. Troy is back again in the green cloud asking, "Where are you?" She eventually like has one of the aliens kind of appears, or like this sort white Jesus-like visage.
Like a silhouette, basically.
Yeah, there's like a white silhouette of like a humanoidish figure, maybe wearing a robe, but it's definitely something different than what we had seen the other dream sequences. But we don't see whether or not she's able to communicate with them or not. Just after there's no longer sufficient power to maintain the hydrogen stream, nothing happens. Picard kind of comes to, and he goes, "Nothing happened." And so they think like, it failed, but then boom, there's a giant explosion from the ship. So we know Troy was successful. We see like the Enterprise gets blasted out, the other ship gets blasted out, and we see like power and life support start to get restored to normal, allowing the Enterprise and the alien vessel to escape. However, the Britannia was left behind apparently. And then the last scene we see is Data orders Picard and the rest of the crew to their quarters to get some sleep. And Data even says, as my last order as acting captain, I order you to get some rest or whatever. And, and Picard's like, thanks. Or I can't remember what Picard says, but have some cute little moment.
Yeah, that was a good moment and a good end to the episode overall.
Yep, and they go off to unfortunately Starbase 220 because Data, being a non-sexual, although he can have sex, can have sex, but because he doesn't have emotions at this point. He's not horny, so he's just going to go to Starbase 220 because it's closer instead of the sexier 221.
Right.
That's one away.
Exactly. They'll get there someday. All right.
So, Steve, I will say, before you get into it, I have a newfound respect for you doing these write-ups. Because, god damn, like, I probably could have done this write-up without even watching the episode, but I was like, no, I should rewatch it. And, wow, it's tough.
Hey, I thought you did a very thorough walkthrough. So
too thorough, I would say.
Yeah, usually, the way I do it, and I guess if you do it enough, I just sort of like, I've got my own sort of little like shorthand, and then most importantly, I'm trying to put in like questions and or jokes for you to, just.
Well, you know what? Next time we do like a cartoon or something short, just to get me some practice. Let me do the write up, and cool. That way we can switch on and off, because I feel a little bad that you always do it now.
Yeah, I'm just happy.
Was this your plan?
I'm just happy you keep showing up. All right, let's run this bumper and end this puppy.
Remember, moderated. Then with the question.
All right, do you want to ask me this time?
Yeah, Steve, I guess that makes sense. Steve, what do you... Oh, shit, I've been drinking too much. Usually, a couple times I've asked, I can do it off memory. But, Steve, do you think... Hold on, it's in the... Right? It's... Oh, no, you just have to say the question. Damn, oh, wait. Does Star Trek Night Terrors, this particular episode, deserve to be remembered or cast into the dark pit of obscurity, never to be heard from again?
I'm going to go ahead and say it definitely deserves to be remembered, although I was a little bit disappointed with the end, just because, like, I really wanted to, and again, this might be like, my normie thinking or something. I wanted to see more of whatever it was they were communicating with. I didn't want to and I get that that's like a very Star Trek thing. It's like, oh man, these aliens are way too complicated for the human mind to handle, man. So like, we're not going to show them, like that sort of thing. And we got a little taste of them. Also, I thought like, they did a awesome job with tension, but I wish they could have gone a little further into like the David Lynch world of weirdness. But of course, this is, 91 or something, 92. And you can only do so much as a syndicated Paramount show, but yeah, I could see like getting this episode and Genesis and some adult beverages and watching it every Halloween. So yes, I say remembered for sure. How about yourself?
Well, you know what I'm gonna say, Steve, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. I figured you would like this one better than last year's episode. I think it's better overall than last year's episode, and kind of talk, just to go to your point that you wish they would have spent a little bit more time with some of the weirdness. I don't know if you saw in the Memory Alpha production notes, but apparently there were 9 minutes cut from this episode.
Interesting.
So there were like several additional scenes. In fact, right here, Michael Piller, which was the showrunner at the time, said that the pace of the show was running long, and that the episode ran 9 minutes over and had to be severely cut. According to the call sheets, there were scenes planned but cut, which were filmed on the engineering set in front of Troy's office sickbay and on the main bridge.
Wow.
Excuse me, so at least 4 more scenes. So who knows? Maybe there would have been something with Geordi hallucinating, because he didn't really get to have one.
That's true. And as a blind man, would his hallucinations be different?
Yeah. Well, he can technically see, right? With
right.
the thing, but I could see them doing something where he loses his, visor somehow, but he can still see something. You could do something like that. But anyways,
wait, no, I know what his hallucination is. A bunch of burning books.
Oh my god.
But
anyways, I obviously say remember it.
All right, here it comes.
It's a fun episode.
In accordance to Obscurity Now, the most important streaming YouTube podcast in all of the internet, you shall be remembered. Yes. Good show. Good show. All right.
I would actually go as far as to say that this episode, if you smoke or do mushrooms, do some of those and watch it, and you'll be probably freaked out.
Hey, well, you got the void scene. I mean, that's all you need right there. Just put that on repeat and let your mind wander.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else we need to mention before we knock off here?
No. I think that's good. I'll try and hopefully next year find another episode.
We could always branch.
I mean, there's a
branch out into the other series as well. You mentioned a normal, or not normal, but OG Star Trek episode possibly, or a DS9.
Yeah, it's not that Halloween episode's not a good one, but
hey.
Yeah, there's a couple other ones that have some terror things. Like there's a Star Trek Voyager episode where there's like a stack of cut up bodies.
Nice. That's that UPN edge, brah.
Yeah, brah. We're the future. Us, Platypus Man, we're gonna be here forever.
And Nowhere Man, Marker.
Hey, Nowhere Man was the shit.
Legend. Yeah, we'll get to that one eventually. But
and the lead star of Nowhere Man was Bruce Greenwood, aka Captain Pike, in the rebooted Star Trek movies with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto.
There you go. And wait, is he? But he's not playing Pike in the new show, right? It's
no,
someone else.
Anson Mount, who is, I love Bruce Greenwood's performance, but Anson Mount is the definitive Pike.
Sounds like he really mounted up to the role.
Dude, he's fucking awesome.
All right.
But anyways, anything else from you, Steve? Anything to plug? I know you still have some copies, I think, right, of Escape to Earth?
Thank you for that lead-in. Yes, of course. We have plenty copies of Escape to Earth, my comic book that I wrote and then paid some guys to draw in color. I'll be playing the promo for it once we're done here. And also, if you're a theme park junkie, my first podcast, Theme Park Legends, still kicking. And there's a brand new episode out to download wherever you get podcasts. And it actually ties into the season because it's about a guy who he worked Halloween Horror Nights, and he tells a bunch of fun stories about drunk guests trying to punch, scare actors in the face.
Jeez.
Yeah, and if that stuff interests you, then be sure to check it out. And of course, if you, for whatever reason, you're not in the comic books and don't want to buy comics, which would definitely support this show and us big time, you can. There'll be a link to our PayPal where you can make a donation there if you like. But other than that, I'll say Happy Halloween to you, and we will be back next Sunday with more Halloween hijinks only on Obscurity Now. See you next Sunday. Bye-bye. I'm having a weird day. The name's Adam. Where I'm from, I'm known as the Zero Thief. Depending on who you ask, some might say I'm the best thief. But believe it or not, even the best screws up every once in a while, and that's what I did, and I had to make a fast getaway. I ended up crash landing on this bizarre planet. Turns out, I didn't get away fast enough. These winged freaks followed me here.
It's just us here, Zero Thief, on this empty backwoods planet. So start talking, either to me or my blade.
Okay, I do have something to tell you. It's about the planet. It's not that empty. Come on, man. I thought you were gonna duck. Cut me loose. Behind you. Whoa. Thought I was done for. It was gonna be a light snack for a snarling creature. But then, she showed up, riding on the back of one of those monsters like it was nothing. And with a wave of her hand, the other razor-toothed beast just stomped away. I'd never seen anyone like her before in my life. I thought I'd say something clever. Thanks, have you seen my ship? She gave me a look that said more than words ever could, because I think she was trying to read my mind or something. And from there, things just got even weirder. Escape to Earth. 36 pages of insane dinosaur action. Issue 1 available now at reptilianmedia.bigcartel.com. Featuring a variant cover by Sean Forney. Act now while supplies last. You've been enjoying Obscurity Now.
a podcast that's recorded live to tape and streamed to Twitch and YouTube. Subscribe so you never miss an episode or hilarious quip. Take us with you by following the download links provided in the show notes to wherever you get podcasts. And take notice of our various social media links if that's what you're into. I'm not here to judge. And make sure you join us live next week at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific as we continue to discuss more obscure media only on Obscurity Now.